I thank those members from all parties who have signed my motion and have turned up this evening to contribute to this debate. Can I also welcome those in the public gallery, many of whom are living with the impact of short-term lets every day of their lives, and I hope today can bring some assurance that Parliament is willing to tackle this issue with some urgency. My motion highlights an issue that is of significant concern to very large numbers of my constituents, and it's on their behalf that I speak today. To begin with, I want to clarify what this motion is not about. It is not about the collaborative economy, where people rent out a room in their house on a peer-to-peer platform. It is not about the platforms themselves. It is about the framework within which decisions are made, or currently not made, about the very existence, extent, scope and nature of the use of residential property in their entirety as short-term letting businesses. Short-term letting has a long history. I'm sure many members have hired a self-catering property in rural Scotland, for example, for holidays. In rural Scotland, such properties form an important part of the tourism economy and provide valuable income for local businesses. In most cases, however, such properties are detached dwellings and have received planning consent for use as a self-catering property. Nevertheless, even in rural Scotland, there remain issues to be resolved about the extent of second homes and short-term lets in areas of acute housing need. But it's in Edinburgh that the phenomenon has taken off and where the implications of this unregulated market is causing severe distress to the quality of life of my constituents. These include antisocial behaviour within communal areas, a loss of community as speculators buy up properties and turn them into short-term lets, mental ill health, including anxiety and stress associated with not knowing who's coming and going, the displacement of the residential population as homes are acquired as lucrative short-term lets, and those that are left to decide whether to stay or not. A tax gap, as thousands of properties are not on the valuation roll and pay no non-domestic rates. And finally, concerns over security, as keys are distributed to hundreds of unknown persons every year, allowing access to residential areas. On one online advertising website, there are 5,474 whole properties available for let in the City of Edinburgh, almost double the number in July last year. And this is despite a City of Edinburgh Council presumption in planning against any short-term lets in flatted properties, yet thousands exist. It is despite thousands of domestic dwellings having conditions in their title deeds restricting the use of property to a main home and prohibiting any business use, yet thousands of owners are flouting these conditions with no redress available to affected neighbours. And a tax system that's meant to ensure the payment of non-domestic rates to support the provision of public services in the city is failing to collect over £10 million due to owners not declaring their properties and because of the 100% relief granted through the Small Business Bonus Scheme. Presiding Officer, I reiterate that the mischief complained of here is not that of homeowners renting out rooms as part of the collaborative economy. It is the situation whereby changes of use are taking place to residential property with no democratic scrutiny or accountability, and properties are being marketed to tourists despite those properties not complying with the law. It's a situation that's causing a degree of stress and misery that should not be tolerated, that causes, for example, a school pupil to fail her exam because of lack of sleep due to an unannounced party by strangers in the flat above her bedroom. Other testimony is as follows. We have lost a neighbour and gained an endless stream of strangers. Cheap holiday lets come at a very high price for people living next door to them. What was our neighbour's house is now a hotel with no planning permission, no safety regulations and no regard to families living next door. I am leaving the Old Town, my home for the past 25 years. I have sold my flat and I'm moving out in January. I have nothing but feelings of utter contempt for the selfish and irresponsible people that have done this. And the Council have been both complicit and complacent, presiding over an increasingly dire situation, only interested, it seems, in turning the city centre into a transit camp. For the record, those were some of a very, very large number of testimonies that we've received over the past few months. Presiding Officer, this motion is called Homes First. And that is the name of a campaign I launched yesterday to tackle this scourge. Homes First means what it says. There is an affordable housing crisis in this city, and what residential accommodation that does exist should be used to provide homes for residents in the first instance. Only through a careful and considered process in the planning system should any short-term lets of whole properties let out on a commercial basis be allowed. The human rights of my constituents to housing and to the peaceful enjoyment of their property is being violated by the rapid and uncontrolled expansion of short-term lets. One constituent observed recently to me that there are three key factors that have led to the rapid growth of this market: cheap flights, online accommodation platforms, and wheelie suitcases. And members here today, before the close of this debate, can, if they so wish, easily book a short break in Madrid, Paris or Berlin from their mobile phone or tablet device. And whilst this has created unprecedented freedom for some, it has caused untold misery for others. And so to resolve this issue, we need to recognise two distinct issues. The first one is how we give councils the powers to effectively decide the appropriate scale, location and scope of short-term lets. That is a first-order question of how property is used, a question normally addressed by the planning system, in particular by the land use class order system, and a first-order question as to whether short-term lets should even exist in any given location. The second question is how we effectively regulate the operation of any short-term letting system and how we manage the impacts. That, Presiding Officer, is a second-order question to be addressed once we have dealt with the first question, because it is not a question that in itself resolves the core issues, which is where and in what circumstances should a change of use be allowed from a domestic dwelling to a commercial short-letting business. To conclude, Presiding Officer, a modern-day clearance is underway as long-established communities are torn asunder in the face of global market forces. Across the rest of Scotland, too, change is underway in towns and rural communities as this new wave of cheap travel disrupts local housing markets. As I said at the outset, this motion and this campaign is not about the collaborative economy, it is about the exploitative economy. And I urge the Scottish Government to wake up to the need for action to tackle this issue before it's too late, to listen to the concerns of residents whose lives are made intolerable by a market that is out of control and a system of regulation that permits widespread illegality.